Irene Dufel.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. I wanted to open with three of my, I guess you'd call life verses. The first one was my confirmation verse, which is Revelations 2:10. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. So I'm 85 years old, and I'm counting the days till I get that crown. And my eagle verse, I call it my eagle verse, Isaiah 40:31. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up like with wings as angels. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. And that's really been an encouraging verse for me through almost all my life. Not get weary. Be strong. Be strengthened by God. And then finally, more recent years, Proverbs 5-6 rather. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. That verse really was my, I guess you'd say, crutch during Bob's Parkinson's and during the fire and during all the things that have been happening recently. But I've had this plaque in my kitchen all these years.
Yeah.
Trust in the Lord. So that's hanging there to keep reminding me. Well, I was born in, as she said, a small town in Iowa community, and I was baptized and confirmed in the church there. Some of my church memories are of the Christmas children's programs. I always had to memorize a part for that. And we had that big Christmas tree in the front, and we always got these little bags of candy and nuts and an orange. How many of you remember that? Any of you?
Christmas.
One is?
Yeah.
A couple of you are old enough to remember those bags.
used to tell me an orange was a big treat back then.
And nuts.
Yeah.
Pardon?
An orange was a big treat back then.
Exactly. Yeah, this was Iowa in the winter, and orange was a big deal, that's for sure. And then when I was 5 years old, I got to sing a solo. I sang Away in the Manger. It's one of my very few solos, believe me.
In the alto.
Right. And then also the Lenten services were very important to me. I can remember always going to the Lenten services and all those beautiful Lenten hymns. And I have missed very few Lenten services in all my life, I will say it. I got to as many of them as I could. One came home from church on Sunday, December the 7th, 1941. Dad turned on the radio and we heard about the bombing in Pearl Harbor. That was the beginning of my years with growing up with World War II. My two brothers, many of my cousins all were drafted. My youngest cousin, about 21 years old, ended up dying in a prisoner of war camp. And I just recently got a book telling about the prisoners of war that came from our Kossuth County where I lived. And most of them came back, but he did not. And that was, yes.
How old were you at the time?
7. 7 at the time, right. 7 on the 7th. Right. And my mom, this is about the time that I really got to learn to love the hymns, because my mom sang many of the hymns, and at that time she always sang, I'm sorry, I lost my place. Well, anyway, my brother was in the Navy, so she would sing, Jesus, Savior, Pilot Me, and that was her prayer for him. And at that time, I really got to know my mom and her love of the hymns. I was in the Lutheran day school, and my teacher that was there from my 1st through 7th grade reinforced that love of hymns for me. And he taught our school the harmonies to many of the hymns. And that's where I learned to love the harmonies. And to this day, there are hymns I can't sing the normal, the melody. I can only sing the hymn in
The harmony part.
I can only do the harmony.
Oh, come sit next to me, we'll be fine.
So I wanted to share with you my hymnal.
Oh.
I got this hymnal when I was confirmed, and you can see it's been used a little bit.
Oh, my goodness.
And I would go through this hymn and play many of the hymns. I'd as long as they didn't have too many sharps or flats, and I could sing just the melody line. But I would go through and sing many of the hymns. So I got to learn many hymns I wouldn't have learned otherwise.
Sure.
But I would just sit there and go through that whole thing. We had a piano, and I was able to do that.
The name on it says Irene Wagner. Is that
Yeah,
right?
right.
1947.
Right. So it's been around a while. Well, as you can see, everything I share, you'll see how Jesus has walked with me through all my life, especially when my mother passed away. I was about 10 years old. The war was still going on. She really wanted my two brothers to be able to come back, but she did not get to see them before she died. But the day she died, I came down with scarlet fever. I was upstairs, and the pastor came up the stairs, and I knew immediately what he was going to tell me. But they had to take me out of the house. I went to my cousin's Viola's farm because I couldn't be there, otherwise the house would have been quarantined. And that wouldn't have worked out. So I spent the whole summer with my cousin, and that was an excellent experience for me. The way I see it now, that even though my mom passed away, through all of this, God gave me two other mothers, my Aunt Alice, who was very dear to me, and my cousin Viola. And I would always send them Mother's Day cards. They were my mother. Now, how did I get out here to California? I don't think any of you really know. Do you, Elaine? Sure. Well, I left home after I graduated, went to Minneapolis to a teletype school. And the intent was that I was going to go to Denver and work for the airlines. But it turned out I was too young. Couldn't work for the airlines unless I was 18, and I was only 17. So I had the choice of working for the railroad. I could either go to New York City or Chicago. Well, I picked Chicago because it was the smaller of the two and the closer, and worked for the Rock Island Railroad. I can remember having to get my work permit. I'm walking down this big avenue, I guess you'd call it, all these big, tall buildings around me, walking up to get my work permit. And didn't scare me. None of this scared me. I just went and did these things, got along with me. And so anyway, in Chicago, that is where I ended up getting engaged. And he wanted to move out to California to be near his mom. And so I ended up going to LA to get married. Well, it didn't happen, thank goodness. And God had other plans for me. And that relationship just did not work out, and probably helped me make me more appreciative of the man I was going to marry. So I was going to church, Manhattan Beach, First Lutheran, and our pastor there had started a group called the Career Club for people that were 20 to 30-year-old people, singles. And Bob came to church one day, and I met him there, of course, and invited him at the next Career Club event. But what was interesting is that we really didn't care much for each other. Well, what did we know? We ended up being married for 58 years.
Kind of worked out then, anyway. All right.
And it was we ended up being the second couple in that career club to get married, and there were several others got married. Eventually, the club evaporated, which was the pastor's intent. So all those marriages lasted till death do us part. In fact, we got together one time to celebrate 25th anniversaries, and there's still a couple of couples that are still married. Marriage is still going strong. So that just proves that the way to do a good, long marriage is common faith, staying common, having that in faith. And we were very active in our church, and I ended up joining the LWML and learned that I could write. I wrote some devotions, and I ended up writing and leading 15
Retreats, right?
Retreats.
Yeah, yeah.
And I love to pick all the praise songs for those retreats. And one of my favorite praise songs, and I doubt any of you ever heard it, is "I'm just an old piece of coal, but I'll be a diamond someday." So I hope that all of you will be a diamond someday. But that was a great old Southern song.
You don't want to sing a couple bars for us?
Well, if I could still sing well, I would. But I remember when we sang it, I had the gals were kind of all in a circle, and as we sang it, I sang, "I'm just an old piece of coal, but I'll be a diamond someday," and we hold out our diamonds. Well, I started working in the aerospace industry when I came out to California. That was in 1955. And I worked in what was called the Reentry Vehicle Department for Remo Wooldridge Space Technology Laboratories. And we worked on our engineers, I would read this, I get this correct. It was the Entry Vehicle Department. Our engineers were involved in designing and testing the RV nose cone on Mercury 7 that brought John Glenn back to Earth from his first orbit in 1962. I typed many a paper and filed hundreds of secret documents, and we knew that this was a very tricky endeavor. And so the day that he made the orbit, we were all standing around the radio listening and praying, holding our breath, because we knew that nose cone could burn up. And that was really an exciting time. And of course, praise God that he landed safely. And that made the 50-year anniversary of the landing on the moon more interesting to me, I think, because I'd been involved with so much of that. But at that time, I was a stay-at-home mom. But I can remember that we were at our friend's house to watch the moon landing, and I had these two little girls, 5 and 4 years old. And I think they watched it, but I doubt that they knew what they were watching. But one of the other, last night I was kind of going through this, and I remembered another important time at on my job. I was in a top secret department. This was some years later, of course. And if anyone knows him, raise your hand. Jimmy Doolittle walked in.
Yeah.
Famous pilot in the World War II. And what was surprising to me when I saw him, it was a little guy, only about 5'6" tall, but powerful. When he walked in, you stood up. I mean, but 5'6". And I can still remember seeing him. It was amazing. From the time I left home, I wanted to share this. These two documents went with me everywhere I went. I always had the pearls of prayer, and I'm still to this day using the pearls of prayer for my devotions. These went with me everywhere I went.
So you're halfway through, just for timing.
Halfway? Almost done.
Okay, well, good.
Maybe I should go back and see what I forgot. I don't think I did. Okay, well, the last main thing that I'm going to share is I call it my 6-month conversation with God. Back in 1974, this was 2 years after Roe versus Wade, we had our 2 daughters, Sharon, who was 11, and Audrey, who was 10. And I was 40, and I thought I was going through menopause. But no, I was pregnant. Well, when I told Bob about this, he first said abortion. Of course, that had been in the news so much. And we were kind of looked at each other, kind of shocked that we'd even thought that. And that thought kind of came and went as quickly as it had. But we were really surprised. I think most probably because we've been hearing about it so much in the news. And so I started talking to God a lot, every day.
When did you know it was twins?
Well, that's coming up.
Okay.
At one point I was even yelling at him. I was yelling and saying, God, do you know what you're doing? Well, of quite a journey, but he brought me closer to him than I have ever been. And I learned about his sense of humor.
No, well, yeah.
I've told you about that. I would, say, well, God this, well, God that, so forth and so on. One of the things like, let somebody else who really wants a baby have it, you could do that. So, but of course his answer was always different than what I wanted. And finally, the doctor gave me the idea that maybe it might be twins. He ended up taking an X-ray to be sure. And I thought, well, if it's twins, at least don't let them be identical. They were identical.
They still are identical.
They're still identical. And so I quit telling him what to do at that point. Don't tell God what to do, because he's got his own ideas, and he's going to do what he wants to do, not what you want him to do. So yeah, Robin and Laura were born on June the 1st, 1975. 2 Sundays ago, how many remember the Jensen's daughters, twins were, I heard twin girls were baptized.
Yes.
And Robin, one of my twins, was here. And they sang, of course, they sang I'm Jesus' Little Lamb, which was their song. And that was quite a great Sunday for us. And I'm really amazed how God has saved me and saved our house during the Tubbs fire. It was, my neighbor had left and realized I was there alone. Because at that time, Bob had started to stay in a care home in September. So God's timing is very, very interesting. And so it was just me trying to figure out what was going on. We saw all those cars in front of the house, and thought something had happened on the freeway. But a neighbor called and said they were going to come and get me. And so they took me out, and I stayed with them that night. And we drove, their friends lived close by, but they were getting a little worried about the fire. They decided they should go to their daughters in Rohnert Park. So we all drove to Rohnert Park. And it was an amazing drive. You didn't drive a whole lot, It was very, very impacted everywhere you went.
Creepy crawly.
Yeah. And it was amazing how God took care of everything for me, having my neighbor take care of me. And then the other amazing thing is somewhere along the line, Elaine calls me. And she had been evacuated, and she was staying with Terry. And I ended up with Elaine and Terry for about a week, I think.
Yep.
How many? There was 7 people and 4 dogs, or 9 people and 4 dogs?
Something like that.
Something like that.
9.
Yeah, 9 and 4. And we stayed with Terry until we could get back into Elaine's house, till her power and all came back on. And I stayed with Elaine for 3 months. And during that time, I had to have my house, which did not burn. I had to have it repaired, however. About 15 windows had to be repaired. Fence had to be rebuilt. The house came, the fire came right to the house. In fact, charred part of the roof. And I found out only about 2 weeks ago, the week that Robin was here, we met the man that actually was there and put out the fire. The house had to have been on fire. And I haven't told you that yet, have I? No. Yeah. That was an amazing thing.
Well, how did you meet him then?
Well, I found out, and I've been going to these meetings
Sure.
of people whose houses had not burned, called standing homes. And one of the people there said that they thought they knew this church or knew of him. And so I got to find it, get his name and number from them. And it just kind of blows your mind when you think about how things work. Trust in the Lord.
And your neighbor's house did burn down.
Did burn. The neighbor did burn. I never had any of that guilt feeling, survivor's guilt, fortunately. And now they're back in their home with their 2 boys.
Oh, they built it? They
They rebuilt, and the house is going back up all over the place. But Yeah, it's been amazing. The whole thing has been, I'd say, amazing.
Sure.
And there were St. Mark angels all over the place that helped me.
Mm-hmm.
Jack especially was one of the, gave me a lot of help with going through all the processes of getting the roof done and the fence built and all that. So God does take care of you. And you think too, I had to go and learn so much these last few years. I don't want to learn all this stuff. I mean, I had to learn all kinds of things, of course, with Bob being ill and that, and then all the things I had to learn about the fire and the hiring roofers and hiring fence builders and things like that. And gee, you never quit learning.
So tell us a little bit more about Bob. I mean, Bob has come and gone in your story, but you were married to him for 58 years. So what did Bob do? And tell us just a little about his growth of faith as well and how you work together.
Well, he was a high school drafting teacher for 39 years, and when he retired, that's when we moved out here, because he wanted to stay in California, but he wanted to get out of LA and away from the freeway. And that was how he ended up here, basically, with his retirement. And he had grown up as a Lutheran in Fresno, and confirmed baptized just like me. We had a very common background that way. And he was a Sunday school teacher for many years, and Sunday school superintendent. And his biggest thing, though, I think, was when we moved up here, the thing that really was his legacy, I guess you call it, whatever, was making those faith chests. He loved making those faith chests. And when Parkinson's got to the point where he could no longer do that work, it was very hard on him, I think, because that was just his most important thing up here. And and I said back there, when we really didn't think we liked each other much, we did start dating, and things did change.
So you and I know each other better because of our involvement with the Pregnancy Counseling Center. So talk a little bit about, I think that your comment that it went across your mind when you were 40 and pregnant surprised you all at the same time it was there. So tell me how you moved into working with pregnancy counseling centers. Did you work with one in LA as well as up here, or how did that go?
No, I just started when I came up here. I knew someone who had had an abortion, and I was very concerned about that person. And I actually got involved with the Pregnancy Counseling Center, thinking in terms of helping post-abortion women. It turned out that wasn't going to happen, but I did work as a receptionist. And one of the reasons I didn't do the post-abortion was, if you start with someone, you've got to stay with them, through. And at that point, we were doing quite a bit of traveling and all, so it didn't look like that was going to be the area for me. But I did want to do something, so I did work as a receptionist for quite a while.
Okay. What happened to the girls? You had 4 of them. You still have 4 of them.
What happened to them?
Yeah.
Well, they've all survived. They've survived the pregnancy. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. The twins were born just before school was out, and I have this teacher husband and these 2 girls going to school, 10 and 11. So all summer long I had all this help. They were there to help me all summer. They all went off to school one day, and there I was, just me and the twins. And that was kind of a wake-up call. Suddenly I've got 2 crying babies on my hands, and it's only me. But that was quite neat to have them around to help a lot. I was really blessed having all that help.
Mm-hmm. So where are they now?
Well, I have one in, still has stayed down in Los Angeles. She's actually in Torrance. She's still going to the church we attended down there, which was Emmanuel Lutheran. And she is married and they have a dog. And you might pray for them, Scott and Sharon, because they really need to let the dog go, but they can't. Scott just can't quite do that. And so that's a concern for them. They have multiple health issues. Scott does with the myasthenia gravis, which affects muscles, especially the muscles of his eyes. But he's keeping his painting business going, which amazes me, because that's probably what's keeping him going. And then we have Audrey, my second daughter, who lives in Salt Lake City with her husband Vicente, who's from Spain. He does AIDS virus research at the university there. Their oldest, Tristan, is going to Dartmouth College this month.
Wow.
And his sister, Sabine, she'll be a junior in high school. Then I have the twins, of course. I have Robin, who's married, lives in Lincoln, has two little ones. She has a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. 7-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy. And then I have Laura, who's down in San Diego working for Southwest Airlines. And that's where they're at, spread out.
Good. Okay, so have you got any questions?
Yeah, well, it's a real one.
Go ahead.
I got a few questions.
Sure.
One, I'm just curious how your mom passed away.
Yeah.
Oh, she had liver cancer. Yeah. When she got sick and had to go to the hospital, my dad we had a small farm. He had to sell the farm to pay for the hospital. So then we moved into town. But that's where she died, is in town.
Another question is, there was a movie recently made about kind of the industry you were in, where these two women were the number crunchers for re-entry. I was just wondering if you
Yeah,
ever
yeah,
meet
yeah.
them.
What was that?
Hidden Figures, the women who crunch the numbers for the Mercury, NASA, and Gemini flight. I think they were in Virginia.
Yeah, they weren't in our department, yeah.
But were you called a computer like they were?
No, actually not.
You were a secretary.
Secretary, and we weren't working with computers yet. Typing on the typewriter.
This is right.
Do you know what a typewriter is?
Just like a computer. Go ahead.
Are your siblings, even though their age is different, are they close?
Yes, pretty close, yeah. Even though there's the 10 years difference. It was interesting as they were growing up. The first two, it was different. The next 10 years later, what was going on in the world and all, it was just like two different worlds, really, having them. But what I would say that Sharon especially was closer to the twins, because eventually Audrey was out of the home and in college. But in those years, they got very close, I think.
I think you probably want to know about her siblings, right? So
Oh, mine?
were you the youngest?
My two brothers. My oldest brother was Iliad, who was the one in the Navy. Next brother was Norman, who was in the Army. And then my sister, Ruth. And then I came along 8 years later. So I was the youngest.
So it's a family thing to have
Family
one
thing,
really at
yes.
the far end.
Yeah, something like that. Turns out my sister also had a late baby. So.
But 40 isn't old.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Even though your last pregnancy came as a surprise, you were just going with the flow of God. I don't know if this isn't too personal, but were you like, man, thank you, God, or were you blessed and are you grateful that it happened, or
Yeah.
Well, it was a struggle, as I said, that 6-month conversation. But after they were born, it was kind of like, well, I'll back up a little bit. One of my appointments with the doctor, at that point, they wanted me to do an amniocentesis. And we had decided not to go that route and take whatever was going to happen. And when I made that decision with the doctor, it was kind of that I'm walking out to the car and it hits me, thou shalt not kill. Because part of that amniocentesis would be to have an abortion if there was anything wrong. And that was kind of a lifted thing. And then when they were born, it was just like taking us off the ground and we were floating in the air. It was very exciting.
It's a great question. Yeah. Anyone else? Arlita.
Musically, you didn't talk about your musical involvement, of course, in the New Horizons.
Oh, Well, yeah, music is a big thing in my life, along with being in the choirs as many years as I can be. I also joined the Sweet Isle Line barbershop group and sang in a couple of quartets, one as a baritone, that's the harmony, and one as a bass because we were all, the gals were singing in lower ranges. And then, of course, before we moved up here, I'd gotten the idea that I kind of wanted to play the saxophone again. I'd played it in high school. And my neighbor was a graphic artist, and he had a saxophone that he was using it to draw from. And so he let me borrow it, try to play it, thought, no, this is not gonna happen. And then we moved up here and heard about the New Horizons band, and I went to their meeting. I could have joined them at the very beginning, but I thought, well, we travel too much. But turns out everybody in the band was traveling. So I joined the band the next year, and I've been in the New Horizons band, which has been a great experience.
So you're still in the band?
I'm back in, because I was out for a couple of years because of Bob's illness.
Right.
Yeah, back in the band.
So tell us a little bit about Bob's illness, how that came about, how he responded to it, and how God worked in that, or what?
Well, I was at an Elderman Mall rally, I think it was, in with Elaine in Ferndale. And at that point, we didn't see he wasn't having any problems that we knew of, but anyway, he had gone to the doctor though, and he'd gotten the report that he had Parkinson's. So he had called me and told me about that when I was up there in Ferndale with Elaine. And so we weren't sure what that was going to mean or do. He didn't have too many problems with the shaking. It wasn't too bad. But the worst problem, he'd been having these fainting spells even before that. And the Parkinson's made the fainting spells worse. He had more and more of those. And I think really what I was dealing with mostly was the fainting spells. Those were my big concern. The Parkinson's itself didn't seem to be a problem until later when he was unable to work anymore with the wood. And he didn't say much about it, but I'm sure that losing that ability was probably the hardest thing for him, not being able to do his woodwork. And just the little things that he didn't say much. He wasn't telling me very much, but he was losing things, some of it, not memory so much, but ability to do things. He wasn't sharing that with me. I had found out about those things later, but it had to be a very devastating thing for him.
And you didn't tell him about the house? What happened?
No. When he was staying up here at the Anson House, as I said, in September, and again, thanks to Jack, I was able to keep visiting him, we were keeping the whole thing away from him. He knew about the fire, but he never really asked too many questions about it, and we just did not let him know too much about it. We didn't want to upset him. He had gotten evacuated, and they took him to this one of the gals that were, the daughter of the people that were taking care of him, lives by the fairgrounds, and they had to take their patients to this little house near the fairgrounds. And all the way there, he knew where he was. He knew where he was going. He knew the streets, and he did very well with that evacuation. I was concerned how that would affect him, but he was pretty good about not asking questions, so I didn't have to have answers.
So when did he die?
On January the 18th, 1918.
So three months after the fire.
Yeah.
And how are you managing that?
So far, so good. I have my lifeline. I wasn't going to move back in the house without that, because to move back in there alone would have been very scary. And so Elaine had one of these lifelines, and so I got one, and I'm there as long as I can make the stairs, because we don't have a downstairs bedroom, but I'm still hanging on, getting up and down the stairs all right, so. Yeah, and it's been surprisingly going well. Yeah, I have my moments of once in a while something will hit me, but it hasn't been bad. It's been good.
Okay, with some more questions?
The faith chest, is anyone still making those?
I believe so. Falkenberg has been making some. He
Okay,
may be the only one I know of.
okay.
Yeah.
I just haven't heard anything during the baptisms about it.
Yeah.
I know, we're still holding on to Renee's because her mother's not interested in it, so we're gonna hold on to it for her. And it's just beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
We have a bedroom for her in our house.
Ah.
So she keeps it in there and she loves it,
Nice.
so.
More?
Oh, I was just curious about the group that you were in, for those who had survived the fires,
Yeah.
the homes,
Mm.
standing homes.
Standing homes.
What was
Yeah.
that all about? I never heard of it. I'm
Yeah.
Well, this group got together just to meet and share some of their problems. Another amazing thing that the Lord did was He kept my house from having any smoke damage.
Oh.
I walked in that door and it was as if I'd never left it. But everyone else, those in these meetings, had horrible smoke damage things to deal with. It was almost like it might have been better off having the house burned down than to have to go through all of that.
Wow.
And so it was just kind of a support group. And at that time we were in a construction zone, but contractors didn't necessarily know that we were living there. They were still coming in and building and as if no one else lived there. And so it was quite a few things to deal with. More so where they lived than my area, because I was right on that Barnes Road where it just curves, and there were not many no close houses, no houses across from me. So I was in a much better location than they were.
So is it all Coffee Park or is it just
Coffee
in
Park.
general?
Yeah, they were these all Coffee Park people. Yeah.
Do you have?
Yeah, I'm sorry, because somewhat new to, what's a faith chest?
Oh. How do you use it? Well, it's a chest.
Okay,
It has a hinged roof. It has a little box on top, or a compartment, a little small compartment. It's given to the babies when they're baptized to keep like their baptismal items in it, or any others as they grow up, Sunday school items and that. And what really shocked me, and I think it would have been, I wish Bob could have been here to see it, was at his memorial, one of the first faith chests that he did, the gal had still been using it, 15 years or so, whatever, and it was just filled with things that she used it as a faith chest.
gosh, what a wonderful idea.
And it was just amazing how she had kept that.
You know, each one of my grandchildren have one, because they're all baptized, they're beautiful.
Yeah.
They came with a CD of music, there were some children's books, I believe, there was a small Afghan, numerous other little items were in
The
there.
candle, the baptism candle.
Yeah.
cloth.
And the little cloth, and yeah, really, just really precious things.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
So
their
that's
chests themselves were beautiful.
Oh, he did beautiful work.
Really.
Yeah, he did beautiful work on those.
So is there somebody that still makes them that, I can get one for my daughters?
Well, as I said, I think Kurt Falkenberg has been making them, but Clark Lancina has been the one that was involved in starting this. And you might talk to Clark and see what he has to say.
Yeah, they were really,
Yeah.
Just baptized last
Yeah.
last Easter, so.
Oh, that would be nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not making a lot apparently.
Huh?
Okay, anything else you'd like to say?
That I can think of.
How long have you been at St. Mark now?
21 years or so. Marianne Campbell's daughter was born when we first came here, so I just figure out how old is she, then I know how long I've been here.
She's 23-ish, yeah.
Yeah, 23. See, I've been here longer than I thought. Yeah, we first came to church here, and the reason we came to St. Mark is that our first Sunday here, Pastor Byer did a sermon on Bible study. The sermon service was over, and I think almost 2/3 of that congregation went to a Bible study. And that really impressed us. And then we met the Baumans, Don and Ines Bauman, and their daughter knew one of our twins' godparents, because they went to the same church down in Central California. And so this was the place to be. What started that thought was being in Bible class with Matt Bowden and Shirley and Marianne Campbell. And that was when Marianne was like this.
So that's how you can mark it that way. Okay, great. Well, Irene wants me to